Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about breaking news. Leonard Fournette has signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and is the newest member after being cut just 2 days ago by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's not forget, Leonard Fournette was a top 12 running back in fantasy just last season. And being cut by the Jacksonville Jaguars, even though it was an unfortunate scenario, is going to be a blessing for his overall fantasy value. We're going to talk about all of the 2020 fantasy football implications with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers backfield, Leonard Fournette, and then we'll talk about the landscape and what exactly the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to do from here on forth. I know many of you were looking for me to talk about this a couple of days back. I knew he was going to get signed fairly soon. It happened, so we'll talk about it all today. Now, before we begin, thank you everybody for the continued support. We just surpassed 15,000 subscribers. I cannot thank you guys enough for your continued support, smashing that like button. Thank you very much, guys. The growth has been, ridiculous over the last couple of days. So for those of you who are new, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll be creating fantasy football content here on the daily for the entirety of the 2020 season. All right, so like I mentioned, Leonard Fournette last season was already a top 12 running back. In fact, last season, he finishes the number 9 running back in half PPR and the number 7 overall running back in full PPR. Because the opportunity that he had with the Jacksonville Jaguars, though, his offensive line wasn't great, the quarterback position wasn't great, and everything around him wasn't great in terms of game script or his overall opportunity, he still made the most of it. I mean, last year, 265 total rushing attempts, 1,152 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 100 targets for 76 receptions, 522 receiving yards, 0 receiving touchdowns, not a big deal, but 221.4 fantasy points total in 15 games. He made the most of his opportunity, but to be honest, now that he goes into this Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization and offense, we think about it and we see, man, Leonard Fournette's one of the best running backs in the National Football League. Now he's going to be in one of the best offenses. When you're in one of the best offenses in the league, what do? You score the ball. And that's where Leonard Fournette struggled the most last year. He only had a total of 3 touchdowns, and that number is going to rise. And if and when it does, I might be over-exaggerating, Leonard Fournette is going to be a top 12 back once again. This offseason, we talked about Leonard Fournette as a mid-tier running back too, and whether he was going to be worth it considering the offense in the Jacksonville Jaguars organization, the little bit of a friction that he had this offseason with the front office, whether he was going to be able to be a top 15 back. That was the conversation we were having. No longer is that the conversation. We're talking about how good of a running back he's going to be, and not only is he going to be a top 12, but how far can he reach in terms of in that top 12 conversation? Because this upcoming season, he's going to be absolutely unstoppable in this offense. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what he did last year and what the opportunity looks like this upcoming season. Now, I did mention his stats before, but think about the opportunity that he had last year with the Jaguars. He played 88.35% of the offensive snaps. It means he doesn't need to come off the field. He's a 3-down back through and through. And even though the Buccaneers have Ronald Jones, LaShawn McCoy, they just drafted Keyshawn Vaughn, they still have Derek Gumbawale. They may have a bunch of running backs, but I guarantee you in the coming days, some of those guys are getting cut. You're not going to be able to roster 5 running backs, and Bruce Arians knows that. And on top of that, the opportunities that he had last year, even with the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, in games in which Leonard Fournette was given opportunity, 19 plus rushing attempts per game, in the 6 games that he had done that, he was averaging 21.17 fantasy points per game last year. On top of that, you want to talk about more opportunity? He had 76 catches. He had, 8 games of 5+ receptions last year. In a half or full PPR contest, that is unbelievable. He had the 5th most targets amongst all running backs last year. He was in the conversations with McCaffrey, Eckler, Tariq Cohen. These are guys that are receiving backs. Just looking at Leonard Fournette, he doesn't look like a receiving back, but he can do it all. On top of that, just looking at some of the more intricate details in terms of his statistics. Everybody looks at Leonard Fournette and thinks he's a guy that wants to run you over. I mean, there are highlights or there are different videos that I've seen from last season. He'll literally call you out, point at you, and tell you to come at him, and then he'll dip his shoulder into you and run you over. If we can get that on screen, I will. But last season, besides having 3.34 yards after contact per attempt and having 886 yards after contact and having 576 yards after the catch last season and improving his yards per attempt last season in comparison to his career. I mean, in the first year of his career, 3.9 yards per attempt on the ground. The following year in his sophomore season, only 3.3. This past season was a 4.3 yards per carry average. That in itself, the improvement over time. Leonard Fournette is getting better, and he's not just a guy that's going to just run you over. He has breakaway ability. He has elusiveness. Last year, he had 31 rushing attempts of 10 plus yards, longest breakaway run 81 yards. He has the speed to break away. On top of that, had 13 rushes of 15 plus yards, 8th most amongst all NFL running backs last season. And then when I talk about him having the elusiveness, he had 66 forced tackles missed, which was 5th most amongst all running backs last season. And all of that was done in the fact that Leonard Fournette was facing against 8+ defenders in the box 31.7% of the time. Now that you join the Buccaneers organization, where it's Bruce Arians that wants to pass the ball with Brady, with Godwin, with Evans, Gronk, O.J. Howard, imagine the kind of production you're going to find. Because you can't stack the box against that defense because they're going to spread you thin. They're going to come out in either, 12 personnel, double tight ends, double wide receivers, or they're going to come out in 3 wide receiver sets with Scotty Miller on the outside, a little bit of Chris Godwin in the slot, and they're going to spread you thin, and then they're going to run the ball down your throat with Leonard Fournette. And I absolutely believe that's going to be the formula to success. This team is trying to win the Super Bowl, and they know they're a couple pieces away, so they go ahead and they grab Leonard Fournette. But let's talk about the opportunities they gave their running backs last season and what Leonard Fournette's going to potentially have this year. I mean, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running backs last season, whether it was Peyton Barber, Ronald Jones, or Derek Gumbawale, they totaled for 337 total rushing attempts. Good enough for Leonard Fournette. On top of that, they had a combined 110 targets. Good enough for Leonard Fournette. On top of that, the Buccaneers running backs, those 3, had 17 red zone rushing attempts from inside the 5-yard line that led to 8 total touchdowns. Leonard Fournette only had 8 total attempts from inside the 5-yard line by himself. I mean, they just didn't give him any opportunity there because they couldn't get there. They weren't a scoring offense. And now that he's being associated with one of the best offenses, those 3 rushing touchdowns he had last year, those are going up, I promise you. On top of the fact that he's joining an offense that runs 2 tight end sets with great blocking tight ends, might I add. Gronk has been a great blocking tight end his entire career, and even if he doesn't block, O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate can get the job done there this upcoming season. Those are 2 extra offensive linemen on top of the fact that they spent a first-round pick on Tristan Wirfs, who is going to be a great offensive piece there as their potential right tackle this season. All in all, this is an improvement for Leonard Fournette, and I cannot see him not being a top 12 running back this upcoming season. I mean, just looking at what Bruce Arians did with David Johnson years ago. In 2016, he fed David Johnson like a workhorse back because he was capable of doing so. If in fact they give Leonard Fournette the opportunity to have one of those kind of years, my goodness, is he going to be a valuable running back. Overall, I think he's going to be in this conversation of top 12. Where exactly? I got to do maybe a couple more research, but this is my initial thought process just after hearing the news. Wanted to record this, bring this to you guys. Again, a couple more statistics. Last season, Leonard Fournette, in the first 8 games of the season, the Jacksonville Jaguars were 4-4. He was averaging 15.86 fantasy points per game. After that, they went 2-6 in the following games, and his fantasy points per game total average decreased mightily. Why? Because the game script. If in fact Leonard Fournette is up in games and the offense is consistently winning, and they can just give him the ball to run out the clock in the second half because they're already beating down on a defense, he is going to take advantage of it. Because when Leonard Fournette is best is when he's getting 20 touches a game, when it's in the fourth quarter and he's punishing defenders. And might I add, even if the game script is against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he caught 76 passes last year on 100 targets. He had, 500, what was this stat? 567 yards after the catch last season. Leonard Fournette is a monster, and I absolutely believe he is going to take the league by storm, and fantasy is going to be a lot more enjoyable with Leonard Fournette in it this upcoming season. Now, I understand you may be thinking, with all those other running backs in the Tampa Bay backfield, is there a possibility that Leonard Fournette doesn't have the workhorse work? I don't think you're going to bring in Leonard Fournette and he's not going to separate himself from the pack. All we heard this offseason was Ronald Jones has improved his hands. Ronald Jones has gotten better. Hey, that was all smoke and mirrors. I mean, even last season, Bruce Arians was hyping up Ronald Jones. He was trying to give him confidence. This is a statement. This is saying we want to win. We don't have the right piece on the roster. We're bringing in the right piece, and we're going to feed him the damn ball, and I'm excited about it. On top of that, I did mention that I wanted to talk about the Jacksonville landscape and exactly what happens now that Leonard Fournette's out of that organization. Armstead, as of right now, is probably going to be the starting running back. That being said, Chris Thompson with Gruden back in Washington were a pretty good combo, but Chris Thompson has only played 10 and 11 games each of the last 3 seasons. He always gets injured, but he's a great PPR back. I love him there, and if you can get him really late in your draft, that's a great value pick. But Armstead, is he going to be of the value of a potential RB3? I'm worried about that because, again, we're going to need a running back in Jacksonville that can catch the ball because the game scripts are not going to be positive. The offensive line is not as good now that Leonard Fournette is gone. The offensive line looked better because Leonard Fournette was able to make contact and run through people. Otherwise, if you have a smaller running back like Armstead, are you really going to be able to allow him to get the ball 20 times on the ground and see what you can make of it? That's my concern, and that's why I'm not 100% jumping and trying to invest into that backfield, because I really do think that team is not in the right position to succeed, and though that may be the case, there is still potential for fantasy value. I just currently think that of the running backs that are on roster, I don't really want anything to do with it because it could truly turn into a running back by committee very quickly, and if and when it does, I'm not going to be associated with that because I don't want to have to worry about, which guy should I be starting this week? Is he going to get enough touches? Is he going to get the goal line carry? That in itself is such a worrying, issue in fantasy that with the Jacksonville backfield, that's something I don't want to deal with this year. But regardless, Leonard Fournette to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm excited. He's a top 12 running back to say the very least. I'm hoping you're excited. If you have not drafted him yet this upcoming weekend, it's going to be exciting. I'll be updating my rankings later tonight for those of you who are on Patreon. I will send for those of you who are bought in the draft, get an updated draft guide with adjusted rankings. For those of you looking for that, go down to the description of the video. You can find more information on the content I create outside of this channel. Again, thank you everybody for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you already drafted Leonard Fournette, damn, does it feel good, right? Anyway, thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.